The world held its breath as President Ibrahim Traoré, the young bold leader of Burkina Faso, stood behind the podium at the African Union Summit. His voice, steady as thunder, echoed across continents. One more move, and we respond. The room went silent, not out of fear, but out of awe. This was no ordinary political speech. It was the roar of a continent that had been pushed too far. But to understand how this moment came to pass, we need to go back not just to the war zones of Gaza or the corridors of Tel Aviv, but to the dusty roads of Ouagadougou, where a revolution had begun in the heart of a young man raised among farmers, soldiers, and the dreams of Pan-African unity. Ibrahim Traoré had always been different. Born in a modest family in Bondakoi, he was raised by a father who taught him integrity and a mother who told him stories of Sankara, Lumumba, and by the time he turned 18, he was enrolled in the military not because he believed in war, but because he believed in justice. While others chased medals, Ibrahim chased meaning. He saw his comrades die not in battles for freedom, but in conflicts sparked by foreign interests, proxy wars, and silent invasions dressed as aid missions. By the time he rose through the ranks, he knew Burkina Faso was not just fighting terrorism, it was fighting centuries of exploitation. When he became president at just 34, the youngest in Africa, many scoffed. But Traoré had not come to be liked. He had come to lead, and he quickly became the face of a new Africa, fiercely independent, strategically wise, and unshakably ethical. As tensions in Gaza escalated in 2025, the world watched, yet again. The unbearable scenes of destruction, children buried under rubble, families torn apart, the hopes of peace buried under airstrikes. For years, African leaders had stayed quiet, playing neutral. But this time was different. This time, Israel had carried out a direct drone strike on a humanitarian convoy organized by Burkina Faso and Mali, carrying food, water, and medical supplies to displaced Palestinians. 3 West African aid workers were killed. The news hit Ibrahim like a blade to the soul. One of the fallen was his childhood friend Aminata, a doctor who had given up her career in Paris to return to serve her people. He remembered how she used to say, "If we don't carry hope across borders, we let injustice win." That hope had been turned to ashes on a desert road in Gaza. In response, the Israeli government released a statement claiming unintended consequences in a hot zone. But Ibrahim was not buying it. He called for an emergency press conference. His face, usually calm, was carved with pain. But his voice was iron. "I speak not just as the president of Burkina Faso, but as a son of Africa," he began. "We sent bread, not bullets. We sent doctors, not drones, and you sent back death." A hushed gasp rippled through the room. He continued, "Africa is not your chessboard. We will not watch our people die while you hide behind apologies. One more move, one more act of aggression against any African nation, directly or by proxy, and we respond, not with bombs, but with unity, with resistance, with alliances you never anticipated." His words went viral. Across Africa, millions stood up not in violence, but in purpose. Hashtags like #Africa stands with Gaza and #Traore speaks for us trended worldwide. Burkina Faso's embassy in South Africa reported over 100 volunteers offering to join medical convoys. Nigerian poets wrote odes. Ghanaian churches held vigils. In Egypt, protesters waved both African Union and Palestinian flags, but with his stance came pressure. Western nations warned of sanctions. French media called him reckless. Netanyahu himself reportedly called Traoré uninformed and provocative. There was even an attempt to sabotage Burkina Faso's energy infrastructure, and claimed, but unmistakably intentional. Yet Ibrahim stood firm. He formed a humanitarian coalition with Mali, Niger, and Algeria. The Pan-African peace convoy moved again toward Gazana with military escort, but protected by the eyes of the world. And when Israeli forces threatened interception again, something unexpected happened. Thousands of activists, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and secular, gathered in Tel Aviv, protesting their government's actions. Let the food through, they chanted. Let Africa speak. The blockade was lifted under public pressure. It was a turning point not just in diplomacy, but in human consciousness. 3 weeks later, Ibrahim stood again before the African Union. But this time, he wasn't warning. He was inspiring. We have shown the world, he said, that power does not come from missiles, it comes from moral courage. We do not need to raise weapons to be heard. We need only to stand together. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Even leaders who had remained silent now stood up. The African Union voted unanimously to create an independent peace and solidarity fund for global humanitarian efforts, funded by African nations and free from foreign strings. And in the aftermath, Burkina Faso's name was no longer whispered. As a troubled state in the Sahel, it was spoken as a symbol of conscience. Ibrahim Traoré returned home to Ouagadougou, not as a warrior, but as a peacemaker. Children greeted him with drawings, some of doves, some of lions. He smiled, for he knew that true leadership wasn't about fear. It was about giving the next generation a reason to believe. In the end, his message was not just to Netanyahu, or to the West, or to war itself. It was to all of us. When injustice becomes global, so must our response. And when silence is easier, speak. Speak like your voice is the last hope someone has, because sometimes it is. End of story. Inspiring message. This was more than a geopolitical standoff. It was a rebirth of African dignity. A reminder that small nations can roar, and that in a world battered by power games, courage wrapped in compassion is the fiercest weapon of all.